Welcome back to the deep dive. We are glad you are here because today we're going to get into some trouble.
Good trouble, I hope.
Definitely good trouble, but the kind of trouble that messes with your childhood.
Ah, that kind of.
We are tackling a story today that is so deeply etched into our collective consciousness that you don't even need to be religious to know the beats. It's the origin story of the ultimate bad guy.
The cosmic villain.
The cosmic villain, the story we think we know best.
Right.
I'm talking, of course, about the fall of Lucifer. I mean, we've all seen the movies, right? We've read the books, maybe heard the sermons. The narrative is just cinematic gold. He falls from heaven, crashes into the earth, and becomes Satan.
And it is a very satisfying narrative arc. I
Yeah.
mean, you can see why it's so popular. It has everything you want in a blockbuster.
It does. It's so dramatically satisfying. It explains the origin of evil. It gives us this really clear antagonist. I mean, I grew up with this reading. It's the cosmic villain reading.
We all did.
It just feels complete. It feels like it answers the big question of, why is the world so messed up? But, and this is a massive but,
Here it comes.
we have a stack of sources here today that are going to ask us to do something very, very difficult.
They're asking us to completely dismantle that narrative.
Dismantle it. I mean, that's putting it politely. The sources we're looking at today argue that Isaiah 14, the text where this whole Lucifer idea comes from, is not about a fallen angel at all.
Not at all.
They argue it's not about some prehistoric rebellion in heaven. They argue it is actually about a human king.
A man.
Just a man. The nature of political authority and a definition of the word descent that totally changes how we view Jesus. And honestly, when I first started reading this material, I felt resistant. Defensive.
Yeah, defensive. I had this feeling of, hey, don't touch my story.
And that is a very common reaction. It's so common, in fact, that the source material explicitly addresses that feeling.
It does.
It calls it the feelings objection.
I love that they named it. Okay, let's start there. Because before we can even get into the grammar or the history, we have to deal with the fact that I like the Lucifer story.
Right.
It feels true to me. So why is there such resistance to letting it go? Why does it feel like I'm losing something if I admit this text is just about a human?
It's fascinating, isn't it? The source argues that this resistance to this new reading, or really this closer reading, is almost always emotional, not grammatical.
Ah.
We have what the author calls a protective refusal. We just don't want to trade a story that feels so epic and cosmological for a story that seems, at first glance to be just about a guy.
A human politician,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
It feels like a downgrade. We go from war in heaven with lightning bolts and angelic swords to what, politics in Mesopotamia.
It feels smaller. It feels boring.
Exactly. But the source makes a crucial distinction here that I think is the key to unlocking this whole discussion. And it's this: completeness of feeling is not the same as accuracy of reading.
Oof. Say that again.
Completeness of feeling is not the same as accuracy of reading.
Mm.
Just because a story feels like it covers all the bases, origin of evil, cool villain, dramatic fall, that doesn't mean it's what the text is actually saying.
That's a tough pill to swallow.
It is. It is. And the challenge for you and for everyone listening is pretty stark. Are you willing to trade a comfortable, familiar story for what the text actually demonstrates?
And what's the payoff?
And here's the promise the source makes. If you are willing to let go of the Lucifer myth, you don't end up with less. You actually end up with something much, much more profound.
Okay, so the argument is that if we strip away the angel Lucifer layer, we aren't left with nothing.
Not at all.
We're left with a better understanding of reality.
Precisely. We gain this profound insight into what divinity actually is. The source argues that by misreading this as a story about a demon, we miss a profound story about human pride and the very nature of God. So the mission today is to look at the grammar, look at the tone, and really re-examine this idea of falling.
All right, I'm willing to be convinced, but you have to walk me through this step by step because I've got Milton's Paradise Lost stuck in my head.
We can work with that.
Okay, let's look at the text itself, Isaiah 14. If we are going to claim this isn't about an angel, we have to start with this basic question. Who is this passage about?
Yes.
If it's not a fallen angel, who is Isaiah actually talking to?
This is where we have to be really disciplined detectives. We have to stop reading into the text and just read the text.
Okay.
And if you look at the beginning of the passage, Isaiah 14, verse 4, the text is explicit. It sets the stage perfectly. It says, quote, "You shall take up this proverb against the king of Babylon."
King of Babylon. Okay, that seems
Right.
pretty straightforward.
It is.
But I've heard people say, well, sure, he's talking to the king, but he's really talking to the spiritual power behind the king, like he's addressing the puppet master.
That is the common rebuttal, absolutely.
Yeah.
But look at the text again. Does it say against the spiritual power behind the king?
No. It says the king.
And throughout the entire poem, the subject remains stable. The pronouns are consistent. You, you, you. The source emphasizes this so strongly. The text never switches from addressing a human king to addressing a spirit being mid-sentence.
Right, but people make that switch.
Interpreters make that switch to save the theology they already believe. They say, oh, verses 4 through 11, that's the human king. But verse 12, where he falls from heaven, that's where it switches to Satan.
Right, the gap theory or the switch theory or whatever they call it.
But the grammar just doesn't support it. The you in verse 4 is the exact same you in verse 12. It's one continuous address. I mean, if I were writing a letter to you and halfway through I started screaming at a ghost in the room without telling you, that would be bad writing. Very bad writing. And Isaiah is a better writer than that.
So grammatically, we are locked in. The subject is a human.
We are locked in. The king of Babylon is a man. He has a pulse. He has parents. He eats dinner. He is not pre-existent.
He wasn't floating around before the world began.
No. He is a ruler, but, and this is the absolute key, he is a ruler whose ambition has exceeded his humanity.
Okay, so we have a human, but here is where the Lucifer reading gets its legs and why it's so sticky.
The I will statements.
Exactly, the I will statements. This king says things that no human should say. The text quotes him saying, I will ascend to heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will be like the Most High.
Yes.
That sounds like more than just political ambition. If a politician today said, I'm going to lower taxes, that's normal. If they said, I'm going to exalt my throne above the stars of God, we'd have them committed.
We would.
That sounds cosmic. That sounds like an angel talking.
It sounds cosmic because the claim is cosmic. But the source has a name for this, and it's brilliant. It's called ontological impersonation.
Whoa. Okay. Ontological impersonation. That is a $10 phrase. We need to break that down for the commute home.
Fair enough. Let's go back to Philosophy 101. Ontology is the study of being, with a capital B. It's the study of what things are in their essence.
Their fundamental nature.
Their fundamental nature. A rock has a different ontology than a dog. A dog has a different ontology than a human.
And a human has a different ontology than God.
Precisely. These are different categories of existence. You can't just, work out hard enough to become a dog. You can't get a promotion at work and suddenly you're God. It's a category error. There's a distinct boundary.
So when you say impersonation, you mean the king isn't just putting on a costume and pretending. He's trying to jump species.
He is trying to jump categories of being. He isn't just saying, I'm the strongest king on earth. He's saying, I am moving my chair from the Human Resources Department to the Divine Board of Directors. He's trying to squat in a slot that his being literally cannot occupy.
So it's not just arrogance, it's a form of insanity.
It is. He is claiming a station, a role, that belongs to a completely different kind of being.
It reminds me of those Roman emperors who demanded to be worshipped, like Caligula or Nero.
Perfect parallel.
They claimed to be gods, but they were distinctly and often messily human.
Exactly. And think about how we react to that. If a toddler puts on a paper crown and says, I am the emperor of the galaxy, you just laugh. It's cute.
Right.
But if a king who commands armies, who holds the power of life and death, says, I will be like the Most High, that isn't cute anymore. It's a distortion of reality. It's dangerous.
So the language is elevated. Stars of God, heaven, Most High. Not because the subject is an angel, but because the claim is trying to reach that high.
Exactly. Isaiah is matching the register of the boast. He's using cosmic language to dismantle a cosmic claim. He isn't introducing a new character from heaven. He's describing the scale of this human king's ego. The king says, I am up here. And Isaiah is saying, okay, let's talk about you being up there.
This sets the stage perfectly.
Right.
So we have a human king pretending to be God. Now God, or the prophet speaking for God, has to step in and address this, and this leads us to the tone of the passage.
Yes.
And I have to be honest, in the movie version of this that plays in my head, when God responds, it's triumphant. It's mocking.
Like a wrestling promo.
Totally a wrestling promo. It's like, ha, look at you now. You thought you were so great, now you're eating dirt in your face.
That is absolutely the traditional reading. The taunt, the sneer. And we love the idea of God sneering at bad guys. It feels like justice.
He does.
But our source introduces a massive theological constraint here. that completely changes how we hear those words.
And what's the constraint?
The constraint is simple. God is love.
Okay, sure, that's Sunday School 101.
Yeah.
But God is also can't he mock a tyrant? I mean, look at Elijah mocking the prophets of Baal. He made fun of them while they were cutting themselves.
Elijah did.
Mm.
But Elijah is a man.
Yeah.
The source argues, very persuasively, I think, that we cannot project human pettiness onto God. Love does not sneer. Mockery requires the desire to diminish someone for your own pleasure or for a sense of dominance. It's a petty emotion. It implies insecurity. If I mock you, it's usually because I want to feel bigger than you. Does God need to feel bigger than the king of Babylon?
No, he's already infinitely bigger. There's no contest.
Right. So the source says Scripture does not permit God to act out of contempt. Even his judgment is purposeful. It is revelatory and, in the end, restorative. So if God isn't mocking him, what is he doing? Because the text says, how are you fallen from heaven? That sounds like a rhetorical gotcha.
It really does. It sounds like Nelson from The Simpsons.
But we need to dive into that Hebrew word for how. The word is ache.
Ache.
And the Force argues this isn't ridicule. It is a grief-filled interrogation. It is the language of a funeral dirge.
A dirge, like a mourning song. That's a huge shift.
It's a complete 180. It's the same tone God uses throughout Scripture when he confronts mystery or contradiction. Think of God in the Garden of Eden asking Adam, where are you?
Right. He obviously knows where Adam is.
Of course, he knows the GPS coordinates of Adam. So why does he ask?
To make Adam realize where he is. To make him confess.
Exactly. It's a forensic question. It's an opportunity for self-realization. So when Isaiah asks on God's behalf, how were you brought low? It's not a taunt. It is a real question. God is asking, by what mechanism did this descent occur? Or maybe, under whose authority did this happen?
That shifts the vibe completely. It goes from a rap battle put down to like a courtroom cross-examination.
Or even a tragedy.
Yeah, tragedy. God is looking at this king who had so much potential, who was created in God's image, and seeing him utterly destroyed by his own pride, and he just asks, how?
Yes. How did you get here? The king claimed he would ascend on his own power. Now he is in the pit. The question how forces the king, and it forces you, the listener, to look at the mechanism of that fall. It reveals that the king didn't have the power he claimed. He was acted upon. He didn't jump. He was pushed by reality.
It reminds me of a parent asking a child who's holding a broken vase, how did this happen? They aren't asking for new information. They're asking for an admission of reality. Look at what you did.
That's a fantastic analogy. It is pedagogical. God is teaching the entire audience the difference between true divinity and false ambition through this one question. He is grieving the absolute waste of a human life that tried to be a god and inevitably failed.
We're going to get deeper into that mechanism of falling in a minute because that's the core of the argument, this idea of being pushed versus jumping.
It is.
But first, we have to deal with the elephant in the room. Or maybe the dragon in the room, the name.
Lucifer.
Lucifer. If the text is about a human king, why does everyone call him Lucifer? I mean, the King James Version literally says, how are you fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? If it's just a guy named Nebuchadnezzar or Sargon, why call him Lucifer?
This is a classic case of a translation becoming more famous than the original text. It's a quick history lesson, but it's important.
Let's do it.
Lucifer is actually a Latin word. It's not Hebrew. Isaiah didn't know Latin.
Wait, okay, Isaiah read in Hebrew, so where did the Latin come from?
Centuries later, when the Bible was translated into Latin, that's the Vulgate, the translator, a scholar named Jerome, looked at the Hebrew phrase Hillel ben Sahar.
Hillel ben Sahar.
Hillel means shining one or bright one. Ben Sahar means son of the dawn. So he needed a Latin word for shining one or light bringer. And the Latin word for the planet Venus, the morning star, was Lucifer.
So Lucifer just means light bringer or morning star. It's not a name.
Exactly. It was never a proper name like Bob or Satan. It was a description, a common noun. Lowercase o Lucifer.
So how on earth did it become a capital L proper name for the devil?
Well, over centuries, people forgot the context. They just saw the words fallen from heaven plus the name Lucifer, and they combined it with other verses about Satan falling like lightning, and suddenly Lucifer became the official pre-fall name of the devil. But in the original Hebrew, it's just a title.
Okay, but it's a heck of a title. What does it mean? Why call the king of Babylon Shining One, son of the dawn? Is that just sarcasm?
It's not sarcasm. The source calls it a role marker. Think of it as a job title or a station. We have to look at the astronomy of the ancient world. What is the morning star?
It's the planet Venus. It's the star that shines really, really bright right before the sun comes up.
Right. It announces the day. It's the herald of the true light. In the ancient world, this was the highest luminary position imaginable. So calling someone the morning star is like calling them the prime minister or the CEO. It's a title of supreme authority.
So the king of Babylon isn't just claiming to be a god. He's claiming to be the head god, the top dog.
Yes, specifically, he's claiming supreme anticipatory authority. He's saying, I am the one who announces the light. I am the one everyone looks to before the real power shows up. The king of Babylon is trying to occupy this slot. He is trying to sit in the chair marked Shining One.
But the source says the slot isn't actually empty. You can't just walk in and sit down.
No, you absolutely can't. And this is where the theology gets so rich and interconnected. If we fast forward all the way to the New Testament, to the very end of the Bible, Revelation 22.16, Jesus makes a claim. And it's a claim that should make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, if you know Isaiah 14.
What does he say?
Jesus says, quote, I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star.
Oh, wow. I never connected those two. I always thought Lucifer was the bad morning star and Jesus was the good one. Like they were battling for the title.
No, it's the same title, the same slot. There's only one morning star position. The tragedy of Isaiah 14 isn't that an angel became a devil. It's that a human king tried to squat in a slot that belongs to Christ. The station of morning star belongs to God alone.
So the king of Babylon is an imposter.
He is a counterfeit. He is an identity thief.
Identity theft on a cosmic scale.
Exactly. And notice, Isaiah doesn't strip the title from him immediately. He calls him Shining One. In the question, how have you fallen, Shining One?
Right.
He acknowledges the role the king tried to play in order to show how badly he failed at it. It's like saying, how did you go bankrupt, Mr. Billionaire? The title itself highlights this spectacular failure.
And the source notes something interesting about the grammar here, too, about the word heavens.
Yes, that's a great point. When the king talks about ascending, the text uses the plural heavens. He wants to ascend above the heavens. This strengthens the idea that he's not just talking about the sky, he's talking about the highest possible authority, the widest possible scope. He wants the CEO chair of the entire universe.
And since Jesus is the only one who actually holds that chair, the king's claim is blasphemy. Not because he's a demon, but because he's a usurper.
Precisely. That is the point.
Okay, so we've got the person, a human king, the tone, interrogation, not mockery, and the title. He's stealing Jesus's job title.
Yeah.
Now we get to the physics of the situation. This is section 4 in our outline, the theology of descent. And the source argues this is the pivot point. If you get this, you get the whole argument.
This is where we have to rewire our brains a little bit.
So the text says, how are you fallen from the heavens? The Hebrew word is nafal, to fall. Now, logic dictates, and the source insists on the geometry here, you cannot fall unless you were high up to begin with.
Correct. And this is where the Lucifer reading usually feels really strong. People say, see, he fell from heaven. He must have been an angel living in heaven. Humans don't live in heaven. Nebuchadnezzar lived in, Iraq.
Right, that's the logical leap. If he fell from the sky, he must have lived in the sky. It seems simple.
It seems simple, but the source argues that because the king claimed the height, remember, I will ascend to heaven, the text treats him as falling from the height of his own claim.
Can you give me an analogy for that? Because that's a little abstract.
Sure. Imagine a man standing on the sidewalk, but he is screaming to everyone at the top of his lungs, I am standing on the roof of the Empire State Building. I am the king of the skyline. Look at me up here.
Okay, got it. He's delusional.
He's completely delusional. And then, while he's boasting, he trips over his own shoelaces and hits the pavement. A poet watching this might write, oh, how you have fallen from the clouds.
I see. The poet isn't saying he was actually literally in the clouds.
No.
The poet is using the man's own delusion to describe his collapse.
Exactly. The fall is relative to the boast.
Yes.
The irony is in the massive distance between his claim and his reality.
That makes perfect sense. But the source brings up a much bigger theological problem with the whole idea of falling. We usually think up is good, down is bad.
Right.
Heaven is up, hell is down. God is up, the devil is down.
That is our default spatial bias. But the source points out that this is factually incorrect according to the biblical narrative.
How so?
God descends all the time.
Give me some examples.
Creation itself. God breathes down and into dust. That is a downward movement.
Oh,
He comes down to walk in the garden with Adam and Eve. He comes down Mount Sinai in fire and smoke.
okay.
And the ultimate example, the incarnation, Christmas.
Mm.
The Word became flesh and dwelt among us.
Right. He came down to earth from heaven, who is God and Lord of all. We sing it every single year.
We do. So if descent itself is intrinsically bad or evil, then Jesus did something evil by becoming human. And we know that's not true. Descent is holy.
The scandal of Scripture is not that God descends, but that only God can descend without ceasing to be God. That is a beautiful line from the source material.
It is profound. It completely flips the script. We think divinity means staying up high, staying pure, staying away from the mess. Scripture says divinity is proven by the capacity to enter the mess.
So if descent isn't the problem, why is the king's fall a judgment? Why is his descent bad and Jesus' descent good? Because they both end up down, so to speak.
And this is the core of it all. It comes down to one word: agency.
Agency, as in who's driving the car.
Exactly. Who's in control? Look at the verbs. This is where the grammar saves us again. When Scripture talks about God or Jesus descending, what verbs does it use?
Well, he goes down. He came down.
He lays down his life, he empties himself, he bows the heavens and comes down.
Those are all active. They're voluntary, sovereign. He is doing the action.
Completely sovereign. Now look at the king in Isaiah 14. Look at the verbs used to describe his movement. He is brought down. He is cut down. He is thrust into the pit. He is cast out.
Passive. He is a direct object, not the subject. He's the victim of gravity.
He is compelled. He is exposed. The answer to God's question, how were you brought low, is this: I didn't have a choice. The king failed, not because he went down, Jesus went down much further, but because the king was forced down and couldn't get back up.
This completely reframes the question, how? God is basically asking, if you are the Most High, why did you have to be dragged down here? The Most High goes down whenever he wants to.
Precisely. True divinity isn't about being allergic to gravity. It's about mastering it. The king's fall was an uncontrolled collapse. Jesus' descent was a deliberate strategy.
That is such a crucial distinction, a collapse versus a strategy. The king is like a skydiver whose parachute failed. Jesus is a paratrooper jumping on purpose.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
One is the tragedy, the other is an invasion.
This leads us directly to the destination of the fall. Where do they land? Section 5. Sheol. The pit.
Yet you are brought down to Sheol, to the depths of the pit. That's what the text says.
Now we have to deal with the visual here. When people read brought down to the pit, or hell in some older translations, they aren't picturing a graveyard.
No.
They're picturing Dante's Inferno. They're picturing fire, brimstone, demons with pitchforks, poking the fallen angel for all eternity. That is the cultural image we have locked in our heads.
It is, and it's a very powerful, very cinematic image. But the source is asking us to hit the pause button on Dante and just look at Isaiah. We have to look at the ancient Near Eastern geography of death.
So what is the actual geography here? What is Sheol in this context?
In the Old Testament, and specifically in this text, Sheol is not a metaphysical torture chamber for the wicked where they burn forever. It is simply the domain of death. It's the grave. It's the dust from which we came.
The source calls it the great equalizer.
Yes. It functions as a witness. Imagine a massive, silent, underground courtroom, or maybe just a waiting room. Sheol is where the king ends up.
Who else is there?
Everybody.
Everybody.
Kings, slaves, prophets, beggars. And it's the place where all human claims finally end.
So it's not VIP access for the super wicked. It's general admission for all humanity.
Correct. And when the king of Babylon arrives in Sheol, the text actually says the other spirits of the dead rise up to meet him. But they don't rise up to torture him. They rise up to marvel at him. They speak to him.
What do they say?
They say, have you also become weak like us? Have you become like us?
Oh, man, that's the sting. It's not, welcome to hell, prepare for eternal pain. It's, oh, look, you're just a guy after all.
Exactly. It exposes the fraud. It proves he wasn't divine. The ontological impersonation is officially over. The mask is off. He claimed to be like the Most High, but he died just like the janitor.
That's horrifying in a completely different way. It's the horror of being ordinary when you convinced yourself you were extraordinary.
It is the horror of the truth. But here's the crucial twist, and it connects right back to our God descends point. Is God present in Sheol?
My gut reaction, no. God is in heaven. Sheol is the one place God isn't. That's sort of the definition of death, right? Separation from God.
That's what we often think. But look at Psalm 139. David writes, "Where shall I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you are there." And then he says,
If I make my bed in Sheol, you are there.
"If I make my bed in Sheol, behold, you are there."
Whoa, okay. I completely forgot about that verse.
God is in the grave. And in the New Testament, Christ descends to the lower parts of the earth. He goes to the realm of the dead. He goes to Sheol, or Hades in the Greek.
So just being in Sheol isn't the proof that you're evil or that you've failed,
Yeah.
because God goes there, Jesus goes there.
Correct. The location doesn't disqualify you. What matters is what you do there. What matters is your status while you're there.
And this brings in the idea of the keys.
Yes. Revelation 1:18. The resurrected Jesus appears to John and says, I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades.
Keys imply coming and going. Keys imply ownership and authority.
Keys imply governance. Look at the logic. The king of Babylon is brought to Sheol, and he stays there. He is trapped. He's a prisoner of the grave. He has no keys. Christ descends to Sheol, unlocks the door from the inside, preaches to the spirits, and leaves. That is the difference between a false god and the true God.
The king's descent was terminal. Jesus' descent was a business trip.
A rescue mission. The logic holds up perfectly. If the king were truly the morning star, truly divine, he could have gone to the grave and walked out. The very fact that he is stuck there proves he was just a man with a big ego.
It's so much more robust than the angelic rebellion story. It's not just a story about a bad guy getting punished. It's a story about the very definition of power.
It's a story about the sovereignty of reality over delusion. And reality always wins.
Which begs the question, and this is what we have in Section 6, why does God let him talk?
That's the big one.
If God knows this king is a fraud, and if God is sovereign, why not just, zap him the moment he thinks, I will be like the Most High? Why let him build the tower? Why let him make the speech? It seems risky to let falsehood speak that loudly. It misleads people.
The source calls this God's strategy of silence. He permits the claim to speak, stretch, and collapse under its own weight. He doesn't need to crush falsehood immediately. He lets it expose itself.
It's like giving someone enough rope to hang themselves.
It is. Think about it. If God zapped him instantly, the king becomes a martyr. People might say, oh, he would have been a god if that jealous Yahweh hadn't gotten in the way. But by letting him run his full course, God lets the king himself prove his own weakness.
And the source uses a brilliant parallel from the Gospels to explain this, the story of the coin. Render to Caesar. I want to walk through this because I think most people, including me, miss the genius of the logic here.
Let's do it. It's one of the smartest things Jesus ever did in a debate.
So, the scene. The religious leaders are trying to trap Jesus. They ask him, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not?
Right. It's a political trap, a perfect trap. If he says, yes, pay the tax, the Jewish zealots will hate him because they hate Rome. If he says, no, don't pay it, the Romans will arrest him for sedition.
It's a lose-lose.
Immediately.
But Jesus turns it into a theological trap for them. He asks for a coin. He says, show me the coin for the tax.
No, you have to visualize the coin. It's a Roman denarius. It has the face of Tiberius Caesar on it. But it also has an inscription. Do you know what it said?
I'm guessing it said something like Tiberius Caesar, Emperor.
It's a Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus.
Son of the divine Augustus. So the coin itself claims that Caesar is a god.
It is a blasphemous object according to Jewish law. It is a graven image with a divine title. By carrying it in your pocket, you are carrying a claim that Caesar is Lord.
I never thought about the coin itself being the problem.
It is. So Jesus holds it up and asks, whose image and inscription is this? They have to say Caesar's. And then he drops that famous line, render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's.
And we usually interpret that as pay your taxes and go to church, a separation of church and state thing.
But look at the deeper logic. Jesus is using Caesar's own claim against him. He is saying, okay, if this coin has Caesar's image and claims he is a god, then fine, give it back to him. It belongs to his weird little kingdom of make-believe. But what belongs to God?
The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. Everything.
Everything. The silver, the gold, the people, the dirt the temple is built on. So Jesus is setting a trap. If Caesar claims to be a god on the coin, he is a false god, because the true God owns the very metal the coin is made of.
So by claiming to be a god on the coin, Caesar actually disqualifies himself from owning reality.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
Jesus is saying Caesar can have his little tokens, God has the universe. He lets the coin's own inscription judge Caesar. He doesn't need to argue scripture. The artifact itself exposes the lie.
And that's what's happening in Isaiah 14.
Exactly. God lets the king of Babylon say, I will ascend. He lets him print the coin of his own ego. He lets him build the statue to himself. And then, when gravity takes hold and the king hits the floor of Sheol, the claim judges itself. God didn't have to push him. The reality of his own humanity was enough to crush the fantasy of his divinity.
It's the ultimate show, don't tell. God doesn't have to say you're not God. He just lets the king try to be God and fail spectacularly.
And that failure is the revelation. The silence of God allows the noise of the king to become his own condemnation.
That is heavy. It makes you want to be very, very quiet about your own ambitions.
It should.
This brings us to the final stretch, section 7. We've dismantled the human king's claim. We've seen him crash. But we need to solidify the true claim. Because if the king of Babylon isn't the morning star and isn't the ascender, who is?
Right.
The source talks about a governing rule called the singular descender-ascender.
This comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 13. Jesus is talking to Nicodemus, and he lays down a rule of physics for the kingdom of God. He says, "No one has ascended into heaven except the one who descended from heaven, the Son of Man."
No one. That's a very exclusive group.
It's a closed set. Population, 1.
So, wait. If no one has ascended except Jesus, then the king of Babylon definitely didn't ascend.
Right. His attempt was a failure from the start.
And Lucifer, as a separate angelic being who supposedly ascended in rebellion, didn't ascend either.
Correct. The category of being who has the authority to move freely between heaven and earth belongs to Christ, and Christ alone.
It's the round-trip ticket.
That's a great way to put it. We are all from the dust. We're from below. We can't buy a ticket to the above. The king of Babylon bought a one-way ticket to the top, tried to sneak into first class, but he got kicked off the train before it even left the station.
But Jesus has the unlimited pass.
He is the only one who originates from the Father. That's the descended part. Goes into the deepest darkness and returns to the Father, the ascended part. He's the only one who can bridge that gap.
So the final verdict on Isaiah 14 isn't just pride goes before a fall. It's much deeper. It's about who actually has the right to the title, who has the credentials.
The verdict is about the test of station. The king of Babylon claimed the station of the Most High. The test of that station is this: can you descend into death and rise again?
That's the entrance exam for divinity.
That's the final exam, yes. Can you die and not stay dead? The king could not. His descent was terminal. Therefore, he is exposed as a counterfeit. Not by God sneering at him, but by the undeniable reality of gravity and grace.
And Jesus passes the test.
Jesus defines the test. He descends voluntarily. He enters Sheol. He takes the keys. He rises. He ascends. He proves he's the morning star, not by avoiding the darkness, but by completely shattering it from the inside out.
Man, that is a lot to process, but it feels so much more solid than the cartoon devil story. It connects the Old Testament to the New Testament in a way I had never seen before.
It grounds the story in the reality of who Jesus is, rather than in the mythology of who Satan might be. It makes Isaiah 14 a gospel text, really.
Right.
It points straight to the empty tomb.
So let's wrap this up. We started with the Lucifer story, the angel who fell. We've unpacked the grammar, the tone, the theology of descent, the meaning of Sheol, and the singularity of Christ. We've realized that Isaiah is talking to a human king who tried to steal Jesus' identity.
We've moved from a story about a demon to a profound examination of human pride versus divine nature.
Isaiah 14 is about a man who tried to be God, exposed by the God who became man.
Beautifully put.
Before we go, I want to leave the listeners with something to chew on. You usually have a final thought that takes this one step further. What's the provocation for today?
It's a meditation on what we think divinity really is. We live in a world that tells us up is the only direction that matters. We spend our whole lives trying to get up. Up the corporate ladder, up the social hierarchy, up in net worth. We think power means being untouchable. We think being like God means being safe and high and distant from all the mess.
Like the king of Babylon, I will ascend.
Exactly. We are all little kings of Babylon in our own ways. But the source suggests the absolute opposite is true. True divinity is proven by the ability to descend fully into flesh, into complexity, into death, into the dark, without losing who you are. The king of Babylon fell because he was human and fragile. God descended because he is love. And love always goes down to where it is needed most.
So if you want to be like the Most High, you don't climb over people to get to the top. You go down to lift them up. That is the sovereignty of descent.
That is a mic drop. Thank you for listening to The Deep Dive. I have a feeling I'm going to be reading my Bible a little differently tonight. We'll see you next time.
See you then.